12 years ago, Captain Natalie Torres died in a classified mission that never officially happened. Her F-35 Lightning II vanished over hostile territory. Her body never recovered, her family given a folded flag and empty promises. But on a quiet Tuesday morning at Silver Valley Air Force Base, a woman calling herself Jennifer Walsh walked through the security gates with contractor credentials and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. What nobody knew was that the most decorated stealth fighter pilot in Air Force history was about to break a 12-year silence that would change everything. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning sun cast long shadows across the tarmac of Silver Valley Air Force Base as the day shift arrived for another routine Tuesday. Hangar 8 stood like a cathedral of modern warfare, its massive doors already rolled back to reveal the sleek, angular silhouette of an F-35 Lightning II stealth fighter. The aircraft's radar-absorbing skin seemed to drink in the early light, making it appear almost spectral against the polished concrete floor. Chief Master Sergeant Ryan Cooper had been working on advanced aircraft for 15 years, but the F-35 still commanded his respect. He watched his crew move around the fighter with practiced efficiency, conducting pre-flight inspections and system checks that had become second nature. The morning routine was comforting in its predictability until it was interrupted by something that definitely wasn't routine. "Chief, we've got a visitor," called out Airman Apprentice Sam Blake, the youngest member of the crew. His voice carried that particular tone of confusion that usually meant paperwork was about to complicate everyone's day. "Some contractor from Washington says she's here for a comprehensive avionics assessment." Cooper looked up from the maintenance log he'd been reviewing, already feeling the familiar weight of bureaucratic annoyance settling on his shoulders. "Another one? Didn't we just have the Pentagon efficiency experts here last month?" "Different kind of assessment, apparently," Blake replied, consulting the visitor notification on his tablet. This one's specifically about the F-35 stealth capabilities and electronic warfare systems. Says here she's Dr. Jennifer Walsh, Senior Avionics Systems Specialist. Technical Sergeant Lisa Grant, who had been calibrating sensors in the aircrafts nose cone, rolled her eyes without looking up from her work. "Great. Another desk jockey who's read all the manuals but has never actually touched a real aircraft. Probably wants to tell us how we're doing our jobs wrong." The sentiment was shared by most of the crew. Military contractors had a reputation for showing up with theoretical knowledge and zero practical experience, then writing reports that somehow always recommended expensive upgrades or procedural changes. In Cooper's experience, the best contractors were usually the ones who said the least and observed the most. "What's her background?" asked Grant, finally emerging from the nose cone with diagnostic cables draped over her shoulder. Blake scrolled through the limited information on his tablet. "Says here she's got advanced degrees in electrical engineering and aerospace systems, previous experience with classified aircraft programs. Security clearance is apparently higher than ours." "Of course it is," muttered Grant. "They always have higher clearances than the people actually working on the aircraft." The conversation was interrupted by the soft sound of footsteps on the hangar floor. A woman in her late 30s had entered through the side door, moving with a measured pace that somehow managed to be both purposeful and unobtrusive. She wore a simple gray business suit with a visitor's badge clipped to the jacket pocket, and carried only a tablet and a small equipment case. What struck Cooper immediately wasn't what she carried, but how she carried herself. There was something about her posture, the way she held her shoulders, the deliberate economy of her movements that reminded him of military bearing. But her credentials clearly marked her as a civilian contractor, and she wore no insignia or indication of military service. "Dr. Walsh, I presume?" Cooper stepped forward, extending his hand in greeting. "Chief Master Sergeant Cooper, welcome to Silver Valley. The woman's handshake was firm and brief. "Thank you, Chief. I appreciate you accommodating the assessment on short notice." Her voice was professional but warm, with just a hint of an accent Cooper couldn't quite place. "I know unscheduled inspections can be disruptive to normal operations." "Not a problem, ma'am. What specifically will you be looking at today?" Jennifer, if that was really her name, glanced around the hangar with eyes that seemed to catalog every detail. "I need to evaluate the integration between the avionics suite and the stealth systems, particularly the electronic warfare capabilities and sensor fusion protocols." Blake and Grant exchanged glances. Those weren't the kind of systems that typical contractors usually had access to, even with high-level clearances. The specific terminology she'd used suggested a deeper understanding of the F-35's classified capabilities than most outsiders possessed. "Well," Cooper said carefully, "I'm sure we can show you whatever your clearance level allows." "Sam, why don't you give Dr. Walsh an overview of our standard inspection procedures?" As Blake began explaining the routine maintenance protocols, Cooper found himself studying their visitor more closely. There was something familiar about her, though he couldn't quite put his finger on what it was. The way she moved around the aircraft, the questions she asked, even the angle at which she held her head when listening, everything suggested someone who was far more comfortable in military environments than her civilian contractor status would indicate. "Dr. Walsh," Grant called out from her position near the aircraft's wing, "you mentioned sensor fusion protocols. Are you familiar with the specific challenges of maintaining stealth characteristics while operating active sensors?" The question was clearly a test. Sensor fusion in stealth aircraft involved highly classified technologies that even experienced military personnel sometimes struggled to understand fully. It wasn't the kind of thing a typical contractor would know much about. Jennifer approached the wing section where Grant was working, her movements becoming noticeably more confident as she got closer to the aircraft. "The challenge is balancing electromagnetic emissions with situational awareness," she replied without hesitation. "The F-35's AESA radar can operate in low probability of intercept mode, but optimal stealth requires coordinating all emitters to minimize detection signatures." Grant blinked in surprise. The answer wasn't just correct, it demonstrated the kind of operational understanding that usually only came from actual flight experience. "That single quotes S... exactly right," Grant said slowly. "Have you worked on F-35 systems before?" For just a moment, something flickered across Jennifer's face. A micro-expression that Cooper caught but couldn't interpret. It was gone so quickly he might have imagined it. "I've studied the technical specifications extensively," Jennifer replied, her professional demeanor unchanged. "The F-35 program represents the cutting edge of stealth technology integration." It was a perfectly reasonable answer that somehow managed to avoid actually answering the question. Cooper made a mental note to pay closer attention to their mysterious contractor. As the morning progressed, Jennifer conducted her assessment with systematic thoroughness. She examined avionics panels, reviewed maintenance logs, and observed routine system checks with the focused attention of someone who knew exactly what to look for. But Cooper noticed other things too. The way she instinctively stepped aside when crew members needed to move equipment, her automatic use of proper radio protocol when asking for system status updates, and most tellingly, how she seemed to know where everything was located in the hangar without being told. "Dr. Walsh," Cooper said during a brief break in the assessment, "I have to ask, you seem remarkably comfortable around military aircraft for a civilian contractor." Jennifer looked up from the tablet where she'd been making notes. "I've spent a lot of time on military installations, Chief. You pick up the culture after a while." Again, a perfectly reasonable answer that revealed nothing while technically being responsive. Cooper was beginning to suspect that Dr. Jennifer Walsh was much more than she appeared to be. The question was, who was she really, and why was she Here, as the first part of what would become an extraordinary day continued to unfold, none of the crew at Silver Valley Air Force Base could have imagined that they were in the presence of someone who had officially died 12 years earlier. Someone whose return would soon put all their lives at risk, and whose true identity would challenge everything they thought they knew about duty, sacrifice, and the price of serving in the shadows. The assessment continued, but beneath the routine, questions and technical discussions, something far more significant was beginning to stir. In less than 24 hours, the woman they knew as Dr. Jennifer Walsh would be forced to make a choice that would shatter her carefully constructed cover and reveal the truth about one of the military's most closely guarded secrets. The ghost was about to become visible again, whether she wanted to or not. The second day of Jennifer Walsh's assessment began with an incident that would make everyone at Silver Valley Air Force Base question everything they thought they knew about their mysterious contractor. Technical Sergeant Lisa Grant was running diagnostics on the F-35's radar warning receiver when an error code appeared that she'd never seen before. The system was displaying a fault in the electronic warfare suite that, according to the manual, should have been impossible given the aircraft's recent maintenance history. "Chief, we've got a problem," Grant called out, frustration evident in her voice. "The RWR is throwing error codes that don't match any of the troubleshooting protocols. I've been working on this bird for 3 years, and I've never seen anything like this." Cooper approached the aircraft, pulling up the technical manual on his tablet. The error codes were indeed unusual, a combination of alphanumeric sequences that didn't appear in any of the standard diagnostic procedures. "Have you tried cycling the power to the entire electronic warfare suite?" "First thing I tried," Grant replied. "No change. The system keeps insisting there's a hardware malfunction in a component that was replaced just last week and passed all its tests." Jennifer Walsh, who had been quietly observing from across the hangar, looked up from her own assessment notes. She approached the aircraft with the same measured pace she'd maintained since arriving. But Cooper noticed something different in her demeanor. There was a subtle change in her posture, a sharpening of focus that reminded him of how experienced technicians looked when they encountered a familiar problem. "May I take a look?" Jennifer asked, stopping beside Grant at the open avionics panel. Grant gestured toward the display screen, showing the persistent error codes. "Be my guest. Maybe fresh eyes will catch something I'm missing." Jennifer studied the display for perhaps 30 seconds, her eyes moving in a pattern that suggested she was reading the codes not just as isolated errors, but as part of a larger diagnostic picture. Then she did something that made both Grant and Cooper stop what they were doing and stare, without consulting any manual or asking for permission. Jennifer reached into the avionics bay and made a series of quick adjustments to circuit breakers and switch positions. Her movements were precise and confident, following a sequence that wasn't written in any technical documentation Cooper had ever seen. The error codes disappeared instantly. All indicators showed green across the board. "How did you?" Grant started, then stopped, looking between Jennifer and the now functioning display. "That sequence isn't in any manual. Where did you learn that procedure?" Jennifer's professional mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something that looked almost like regret. "Sometimes field experience develops workarounds that don't make it into official documentation," she said carefully. "The RUR has a known issue with initialization sequences when certain environmental parameters are met." Cooper stepped closer, his instincts as a senior non-commissioned officer fully engaged. "Dr. Walsh, that wasn't a standard workaround. What you just did required intimate knowledge of the aircraft's classified electronic warfare architecture. Knowledge that comes from operational experience, not theoretical study." The hangar had grown quiet. Airman Blake and several other crew members had stopped their work to watch the exchange, sensing that something significant was happening even if they couldn't quite identify what it was. Jennifer met Cooper's gaze directly. "Chief, I've worked on many different aircraft systems over the years. Sometimes the solutions from one platform apply to another." It was another non-answer, delivered with the same professional courtesy she'd maintained since arriving. But Cooper wasn't buying it anymore. In his 15 years of military service, he'd learned to recognize when someone was telling him the truth, when they were lying, and when they were carefully avoiding the truth altogether. Dr. Jennifer Walsh was definitely in the third category. "Sam," Cooper called out to Blake, "pull up the maintenance history on that RWR unit. I want to see every entry from the past 6 months." As Blake accessed the records, Grant continued to study Jennifer with obvious curiosity. "Ma'am, I have to ask, have you actually flown in an F-35? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Jennifer's hands, which had been steady throughout the morning, showed the slightest tremor as she adjusted her tablet. "I'm here to assess avionics systems, Sergeant, not to discuss my personal experience." But her evasion only made Grant more persistent. "It's just that the way you diagnosed that problem, the confidence with which you made those adjustments, it reminded me of how pilots troubleshoot systems during flight. Like muscle memory." Cooper was studying the maintenance records Blake had pulled up when something caught his attention. The RUR error that Jennifer had just fixed had appeared once before, 6 months earlier, during a training exercise. According to the notes, it had taken the depot maintenance team 3 days to solve the same problem Jennifer had fixed in 30 seconds. "Dr. Walsh," Cooper said slowly, "according to these records, the last time we saw those error codes, it required a complete system replacement and recertification. The fix you just performed isn't documented anywhere in our maintenance database." Jennifer's composure was showing more cracks now. She glanced toward the hangar entrance as if calculating distances, then back at the assembled crew who were all watching her with varying degrees of suspicion and curiosity. "Sometimes unconventional approaches yield better results than standard procedures," she said, but her voice lacked the confident authority it had carried earlier. Blake, who had been quietly working at his computer terminal, suddenly looked up with an expression of surprise. "Chief, I just ran a search on that error code sequence. It shows up in classified after-action reports from combat operations, but those files are above my clearance level." The implications of that statement settled over the hangar like a cloud. Combat operations, classified reports, error codes that only appeared during actual military missions, not routine maintenance in a peacetime environment. Grant took a step closer to Jennifer, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "Ma'am, who are you really?" For a long moment, Jennifer didn't respond. She stood perfectly still, and Cooper could see her weighing options, calculating risks, making the kind of rapid decision tree analysis that came from years of training. In high-stakes situations, finally she spoke, and for the first time since arriving at Silver Valley, her voice carried a hint of the authority that comes from command experience. "Sergeant Grant, sometimes the most important questions are the ones that can't be answered directly. What I can tell you is that your aircraft is functioning perfectly, your maintenance procedures are exemplary, and your crew's professionalism is exactly what I'd expect from the finest Air Force in the world." It was a masterful deflection that managed to compliment the crew while revealing absolutely nothing about her true identity. But Cooper noticed something else in her tone, a subtle shift that suggested Dr. Jennifer Walsh was much more accustomed to giving orders than taking them. As the morning wore on, the crew found themselves paying closer attention to their mysterious contractor. They began to notice things they'd missed before, the way she automatically stepped to the correct position during safety briefings, her instinctive use of military time and terminology, and most tellingly, how she seemed to know the aircraft's capabilities and limitations better than people who worked on it every day. The assessment continued, but everyone in Hangar 8 understood that they were witnessing something extraordinary. The woman who called herself Dr. Jennifer Walsh was clearly far more than a civilian contractor, conducting routine inspections. What none of them could have imagined was that they were in the presence of someone who had been officially dead for 12 years. Someone whose return to Silver Valley Air Force Base was about to trigger a chain of events that would put all their lives in danger and force the military's most closely guarded secret into the open. The ghost pilot's carefully constructed cover was beginning to crack, and soon, very soon, it would shatter completely. By the third day of Jennifer Walsh's assessment, the crew at Silver Valley Air Force Base had moved beyond casual curiosity into active investigation. What had started as minor inconsistencies in her behavior had evolved into a collection of evidence that pointed towards something far more significant than a simple contractor audit. Chief Master Sergeant Cooper found himself arriving at the hangar earlier than usual, using the quiet pre-dawn hours to conduct his own research. The base's secure computer terminals offered limited access to personnel databases, but Cooper had learned over the years that persistent digging often revealed information that casual searches missed. He started with the basics. Jennifer Walsh, Avionics Systems Specialist, Clearance Level TSSCI. The official record was remarkably clean, perhaps too clean. Her employment history showed steady progression through various defense contractors, all with impeccable references and successful project completions. But when Cooper tried to dig deeper into specific details, he hit walls. Problems, Chief? Technical Sergeant Grant had arrived early as well, carrying 2 cups of coffee and an expression that suggested she'd been doing her own thinking about their mysterious visitor. "Maybe," Cooper replied, accepting the coffee gratefully. "I've been trying to verify Dr. Walsh's background, and everything checks out perfectly. Too perfectly." Grant settled into a chair beside him, pulling up her own terminal. "What do you mean?" "Look at this employment record. 5 different defense contractors over the past 8 years, all working on classified aircraft programs. Stellar performance reviews, security clearances that never lapsed, no gaps in employment history." Cooper highlighted sections of the record as he spoke. "It's like she's the perfect contractor. And that's a problem because nobody's perfect, Lisa. Real people have gaps in their employment. Conflicts with supervisors, projects that don't go smoothly. This record reads like it was constructed to pass scrutiny, not like it documents an actual career." Grant pulled up a different search interface. "What about social media presence? Professional networking sites?" Cooper had already tried that. "Avenue. Nothing. Dr. Jennifer Walsh appears to exist only in official government databases and contractor records. No social media footprint, no professional publications, no conference presentations. It's like she materialized into existence 8 years ago." They worked in companionable silence for several minutes, each following different investigative threads. Grant was examining technical publications, looking for any papers or articles attributed to someone with Jennifer's supposed expertise. Cooper was cross-referencing her security clearance dates with known classified programs, trying to establish a pattern. "Chief," Grant said quietly, "I found something interesting. Look at this." She had pulled up a list of contractors who had worked on the F-35 program during its development phase. The list was heavily redacted, with most names blacked out for security reasons, but one entry caught Cooper's attention. J. Walsh, Systems Integration Specialist, Lockheed Martin, 2015 to 2018. Grant pointed to the entry. The timeline matches, and the technical expertise would explain her knowledge of the aircraft's classified systems. Cooper studied the entry carefully. But this shows her working for Lockheed Martin directly, not as an independent contractor. And the security clearance level is higher than what she's showing now. Before Grant could respond, they were interrupted by the arrival of Airman Blake, who looked like he'd been running. "Chief, Sergeant Grant, you need to see this," Blake said, slightly out of breath. "I was doing the morning pre-flight check on the F-35, and Dr. Walsh was already here. She was doing things that civilian contractors definitely aren't supposed to be doing. Cooper and Grant followed Blake back to the hangar, where they found Jennifer standing beside the open cockpit of the F-35. She wasn't just observing, she was methodically checking switch positions and instrument settings with the practiced efficiency of someone who had done it thousands of times before. "Dr. Walsh," Cooper called out, his voice carrying the new edge of authority. "That's a restricted area. Civilian personnel aren't authorized to access flight controls." Jennifer looked up from the cockpit, and for a moment her professional mask slipped completely. The expression on her face wasn't that of a contractor who had been caught overstepping boundaries. It was the look of someone who had been interrupted while performing a routine task in their natural environment. "I was just verifying the configuration of the avionics displays," she said, climbing down from the aircraft. But her movements were too fluid, too comfortable. She handled the cockpit ladder and safety equipment like someone who had used them countless times. Grant stepped forward, her voice carefully controlled. "Ma'am, that cockpit configuration requires pilot-level knowledge to understand properly. The instrument layout and switch functions aren't documented in any contractor materials." Jennifer's hands, Cooper noticed, had moved instinctively to the flight suit pockets that weren't there, the automatic gesture of a pilot reaching for familiar equipment. It was a small tell, but a significant one. "I've studied the technical specifications extensively," Jennifer replied, falling back on her standard deflection. But the words sounded hollow now, worn thin by repetition. Blake, emboldened by the growing tension, decided to ask the question that had been bothering him since the previous day. "Ma'am, yesterday when you fixed that RWR problem, you used radio terminology that sounded like pilot communication protocols. Where did you learn to speak like that?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Jennifer looked at each of them in turn, and Cooper could see her calculating, weighing options, making decisions about how much truth she could afford to reveal. Sometimes technical communication follows similar patterns across different specialties, she said finally, but Grant wasn't satisfied with another non-answer. "Ma'am, with respect, that's not what this is about. The way you move around this aircraft, the confidence with which you handle classified systems, the intuitive understanding of flight operations, it all points to direct experience." Flight experience, Cooper decided to push harder. "Dr. Walsh, I'm going to ask you a direct question, and I'd appreciate a direct answer. Have you ever been qualified to fly military aircraft?" For a long moment, Jennifer didn't respond. She stood perfectly still beside the F-35, her eyes moving from the aircraft to the crew members watching her, then back to the aircraft. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet but clear. "Chief, there are some questions that can't be answered without compromising information that's classified at levels beyond your clearance." It was the first time she had acknowledged, even indirectly, that there was more to her story than she could reveal. The admission created a moment of electric tension in the hangar. Grant pressed the advantage. "Ma'am, if you have flight qualifications that are relevant to this assessment, shouldn't that information be part of your official credentials?" Jennifer's composure cracked just a little more. "Sergeant, sometimes official credentials don't tell the complete story." Cooper felt pieces of a larger puzzle beginning to align in his mind. A contractor with perfect credentials but no verifiable history, technical knowledge that exceeded what any civilian should possess, flight experience that couldn't be officially acknowledged, and most tellingly, classification levels that went beyond normal boundaries. "Dr. Walsh," he said carefully, "are you here on official assignment, or are you here for reasons that have nothing to do with a routine avionics assessment?" Jennifer met his gaze directly, and for the first time since arriving at Silver Valley, she allowed a hint of her true authority to show through. "Chief, I'm here because this aircraft and this crew may soon be called upon to do something that requires them to be absolutely perfect. My job is to ensure they're ready." The words carried weight that went far beyond a simple contractor evaluation. They suggested knowledge of future operations, awareness of potential threats, and responsibility for outcomes that civilian contractors didn't typically carry. As the morning progressed, it became clear to everyone in Hangar 8 that Dr. Jennifer Walsh was operating under a cover story that was becoming increasingly difficult to maintain. The question was no longer whether she was more than she appeared to be. It was what exactly she was hiding, and why the truth was so important that someone had gone to extraordinary lengths to conceal it. What the crew couldn't have known was that Jennifer's true identity was protected by classification levels that officially didn't exist, and that her presence at Silver Valley was part of a shadow program that had been operating in the margins of military aviation for over a decade. The ghost pilot's cover was disintegrating, and soon events would force her to choose between maintaining her carefully constructed anonymity and fulfilling the mission that had brought her back from the dead. The breakthrough came during what should have been a routine afternoon maintenance briefing. Chief Master Sergeant Cooper was reviewing the week's inspection schedule when his secure terminal chimed with an incoming priority message. What he saw on the screen made his blood run cold. "Lisa, Sam, get over here," Cooper called out, his voice tight with urgency. "Now." Technical Sergeant Grant and Airman Blake quickly gathered around Cooper's terminal, where a classified intelligence brief was displayed. The header read, "Threat Assessment Silver Valley, AFB Immediate Attention Required." Blake read aloud from the brief, "Intelligence indicates hostile forces have acquired detailed schematics of F-35 stealth capabilities. Potential for targeted attack on Silver Valley installation within 72 to 96 hours. All personnel to maintain heightened security. Awareness." Grant felt her stomach drop. "Chief, if enemy forces have our aircraft specifications, they'll know exactly how to counter our stealth advantages. Any mission we fly could be walking into a trap." Cooper was already pulling up additional classified files, his security clearance, granting him access to information that painted an even more disturbing picture. "It's worse than that. Look at this threat analysis. The intelligence leak includes not just technical specifications, but operational patterns, pilot training protocols, and mission planning procedures." Across the hangar, Jennifer Walsh had stopped her assessment work and was listening to their conversation with obvious concern. But it wasn't the concern of a civilian contractor worried about base security. It was the focused attention of someone evaluating tactical threats and operational implications. "Dr. Walsh," Cooper called out, "you might want to consider cutting your assessment short. If there's a credible threat to this installation, civilian personnel should probably be evacuated." Jennifer approached their workstation with that same measured pace she'd maintained since arriving, but something in her demeanor had changed. There was a sharpening of focus, a subtle shift in posture that reminded Cooper of how combat veterans responded to threat briefings. "What's the nature of the intelligence leak?" she asked, studying the classified display over Cooper's shoulder. Grant shot her a surprised look. "Ma'am, that's classified information. Civilian contractors don't typically have access to threat assessments." But Jennifer was already reading the intelligence brief with the rapid comprehension of someone who understood military threat analysis. Her questions came fast and precise. "What's the source reliability of this intelligence? Has it been corroborated through multiple channels? What's the estimated timeline for potential hostile action?" Cooper found himself answering before he'd fully processed how inappropriate it was to discuss classified threats with a civilian contractor. Sources rated highly reliable. Corroborated through signals intelligence and human assets. Timeline suggests imminent threat, possibly within 48 hours. Jennifer's expression darkened as she absorbed the information. She stepped back from the terminal and pulled out her secure phone, a device that Blake suddenly realized was far more sophisticated than any contractor should possess. "Dr. Walsh," Blake said slowly, "that communication device. It's military-grade encryption, isn't it?" Jennifer looked up from her phone with an expression that carried none of the professional courtesy she'd maintained for 3 days. For the first time since arriving at Silver Valley, she looked like exactly what she was, a combat veteran assessing a tactical situation. "Sam, there are aspects of this situation that go beyond a routine contractor assessment," she said, her voice carrying new authority. "How many F-35s do you have at full operational readiness?" The question was asked with the commanding tone of someone accustomed to receiving immediate and accurate tactical information. Grant and Blake exchanged glances. This wasn't how civilian contractors spoke to military personnel. Cooper made a decision that would change everything. "Dr. Walsh, I'm going to ask you one more time. Who are you really?" Jennifer looked at each of them in turn, then at the F-35 sitting in the hangar behind them. When she spoke, her voice was quiet but carried the weight of absolute authority. "Chief, if hostile forces attack this installation with the intelligence they've acquired, that aircraft represents the only tactical advantage you have. The question is whether your crew is prepared to support a mission that goes beyond anything in your standard operational procedures." Grant stepped forward, her suspicions finally crystallizing into certainty. "Ma'am, you're not just a contractor. Are you? You're here because someone knew this threat was coming." Jennifer met her gaze directly. "Sergeant, sometimes the best way to protect valuable assets is to have the right people in the right place at the right time." Cooper was accessing another classified database, his fingers flying over the keyboard as he searched through archived personnel files. Something about Jennifer's bearing, her automatic use of military protocols, her intuitive understanding of combat aviation, it all pointed toward a conclusion that should have been impossible. "Dr. Walsh," he said slowly, "I'm looking at classified pilot databases going back 15 years. I'm seeing records for pilots who were killed in action, whose identities were classified beyond normal levels." Jennifer's phone buzzed with an incoming encrypted message. She glanced at it, and Cooper saw her expression shift from caution to grim determination. "Chief, in approximately 6 hours, you're going to receive orders for an emergency scramble mission. A mission that will require this F-35 to penetrate hostile airspace using capabilities that aren't in any standard tactical manual." Blake felt the pieces clicking together in his mind. "Ma'am, you're talking like someone who's flown combat missions in stealth aircraft. Like someone who knows exactly what this situation requires." Cooper had found what he was looking for in the classified archives. A personnel file marked with the highest levels of security classification. A record of a pilot who had been officially killed in action 12 years earlier during Operation Midnight Echo. A pilot whose service record included commendations for impossible missions and tactical innovations that had redefined stealth fighter capabilities. Photograph in the file was 12 years old, but the face was unmistakable. "Captain Natalie Torres," Cooper read aloud from the screen. "Officially killed in action, August 15, 2012. Stealth fighter pilot, classified operations specialist." He looked up from the terminal directly at Jennifer. "Except you're not dead. Are you?" For a long moment, Jennifer Natalie stood perfectly still. The careful facade she'd maintained for 3 days was crumbling, and everyone in the hangar could see the combat pilot emerging from beneath the contractor's disguise. "Chief," she said finally, "Captain Natalie Torres died 12 years ago during a mission that officially never happened. What remained was classified too highly to continue existing officially." Grant's voice was barely above a whisper. "But you're here, you're alive," Natalie nodded slowly. "Dr. Jennifer Walsh is a cover identity that's allowed me to move through military installations for the past 8 years, ensuring that aircraft and crews are ready for the missions that conventional planning can't address. Cooper leaned back in his chair, trying to process the magnitude of what he'd just learned. The ghost pilot. There have been rumors for years about a stealth fighter pilot who appears before major operations, someone who ensures mission success through advanced preparation. Sometimes, Natalie replied, the most important missions are the ones that can't be officially acknowledged. Sometimes the best way to serve is to not officially exist. Blake was staring at her with a mixture of awe and confusion. Ma'am, if you've been dead for 12 years, why are you here now? Why reveal yourself? Natalie's secure phone buzzed again with another encrypted message. She read it quickly, and when she looked up, her expression was grim. Because in approximately 4 hours, hostile forces are going to launch a coordinated attack on this installation. An attack designed specifically to neutralize F-35 capabilities using the stolen intelligence. And the only way to stop them is for someone to fly a mission that officially can't happen, using tactical approaches that aren't in any manual. The hangar fell silent as the implications sank in. The woman they'd known as Dr. Jennifer Walsh was not only a legendary pilot who'd supposedly been dead for over a decade, she was also their only hope for surviving what was coming. Cooper looked from Natalie to the F-35, then back to his crew. Captain Torres, what do you need from us? For the first time since arriving at Silver Valley, Natalie Torres smiled with genuine warmth. I need you to do what you've always done, Chief. Take care of the aircraft and trust your training. The only difference is that today, we're going to find out just how good you really are. The ghost pilot's cover was completely blown, but her mission was just beginning. In less than 4 hours, everything they thought they knew about routine operations was about to change forever. The emergency klaxon shattered the afternoon quiet at Silver Valley Air Force Base at exactly 15:47 hours, 3 hours ahead of Natalie's predicted timeline. The piercing wail of the alarm system sent personnel scrambling to emergency stations. Throughout the installation, but in Hangar 8, the crew was already in motion before the first note sounded. All personnel, the base-wide announcement crackled through speakers throughout the facility. This is not a drill. Code red, I repeat, code red. All flight crews to immediate readiness. All ground personnel to emergency stations. Chief. Master Sergeant Cooper's radio erupted with urgent communications from the command center. Hangar 8, this is base operations. We have multiple bogies inbound. Estimated time to target 8 minutes. Scramble authority granted for immediate defensive response. Cooper grabbed his headset, his 15 years of military experience taking over. Base operations, Hangar 8, understood. Our F-35 is mission ready, but our primary pilot is... He paused, looking at Natalie, who was already moving toward the aircraft with the fluid efficiency of someone who had done this hundreds of times before. Hangar 8, base operations. Be advised, our primary pilot is in medical with acute food poisoning. We need alternative solutions immediately. Technical Sergeant Grant was pulling up threat displays on her terminal, her face pale as the tactical picture became clear. Chief, look at this. 6 aircraft inbound from the northeast, flying below radar coverage. They're using exactly the approach vectors that would counter our standard defensive protocols. Airman Blake was staring at the threat analysis with growing horror. They know our procedures. They know exactly how we would respond to this kind of attack. Natalie had reached the F-35 and was conducting a rapid pre-flight inspection with movements that were pure muscle memory. Chief, I need this aircraft armed and ready for immediate departure. Air-to-air configuration. Full defensive suite activation. Cooper hesitated for just a moment. Authorizing a civilian contractor to fly a combat mission was so far outside regulations that it could end his career and potentially land him in military prison. But the alternative was watching enemy aircraft destroy the installation and everyone on it. Sam, get the weapon systems online, Cooper ordered. Lisa, run. The fastest pre-flight check of your life. We're launching in 6 minutes. Grant's hands flew over her keyboard, activating systems and running diagnostics that normally took 30 minutes in a compressed timeline that would have to work in 5. Natalie, the electronic warfare suite is showing green across the board. All defensive systems are operational. The use of her real name marked a fundamental shift in the dynamic. She was no longer Dr. Jennifer Walsh, civilian contractor. She was Captain Natalie Torres, combat pilot, and everyone in the hangar was now part of her crew. "Chief," Natalie called out as she began suiting up in flight gear that Blake was pulling. "From emergency storage, I need you to understand something. The mission I'm about to fly isn't in any tactical manual. If this goes wrong, if I don't make it back, the official story is that an unauthorized contractor stole an aircraft during an emergency. Understood?" Cooper was helping her with the flight suit, his hands steady despite the enormity of what they were doing. "Captain, with respect, the only thing I understand is that hostile aircraft are inbound and you're the only pilot we have. Everything else is paperwork." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The tactical display showed the approaching aircraft had split into 2 formations, one targeting the airbase directly while the other was positioning for a flanking attack that would trap any defending aircraft in a crossfire. It was a sophisticated assault plan that demonstrated intimate knowledge of Silver Valley's defensive capabilities. "Natalie," Grant called out from her terminal, "the threat aircraft are broadcasting jamming signals specifically designed to counter F-35 sensor systems. They know exactly what frequencies to target." Natalie paused in her equipment check, studying the tactical display with the focused attention of a combat veteran. "They're not just using our stolen intelligence, they're using it to set a trap. They want me to launch into a prepared kill zone." Blake looked confused. "Then what do we do?" Natalie's smile was sharp and dangerous. "We give them exactly what they expect, and then we do something they've never seen before." She finished her pre-flight preparations and climbed into the F-35's cockpit with movements that were pure poetry. Every switch activation, every system check, every procedure was executed with the precision that came from thousands of hours of flight time. "Base operations, this is Ghost One." Natalie's voice came through the radio, using a call sign that officially didn't exist. "Requesting immediate takeoff clearance." The response from the control tower was immediate. "Ghost One, you are cleared for immediate departure, runway 27, winds light and variable. Good hunting." Cooper stood beside the aircraft as the massive engine spooled up, its deep rumble filling the hangar. Through the cockpit canopy, he could see Natalie running through final systems checks with the calm efficiency of someone who had done this under fire before. "Captain," he called out over the engine noise, "bring our bird home." Natalie's voice came through clearly on the radio. "Chief, I've been bringing birds home for 20 years. Today won't be any different." As the F-35 taxied toward the runway, Grant monitored the approaching threat aircraft on her displays. 6 minutes to contact," she announced to the hangar. "Whatever she's planning, it needs to happen fast." The enemy formation was maintaining perfect tactical discipline, following attack patterns that suggested military-level training and equipment. These weren't insurgents or terrorists, they were professional military aviators, flying advanced aircraft and using sophisticated electronic warfare systems. Cooper's radio crackled with updates from the command center. "All stations, be advised. Satellite reconnaissance confirms enemy aircraft are advanced fighters of unknown origin. Stealth characteristics suggest near-peer adversary capabilities." Blake looked up from his monitoring station with obvious concern. "Chief, she's going up against 6 advanced fighters in a single aircraft. Even with the F-35's capabilities, those aren't good odds." But Grant was studying the tactical display with growing understanding. "Sam, look at the enemy formation. There. Positioned exactly where conventional tactics would place defending fighters. They're expecting her to follow standard intercept procedures." Cooper nodded grimly, "Which means she won't." Captain Torres didn't become a legend by following standard procedures. The F-35 lifted off from runway 27 with the characteristic steep climb angle that showcased the aircraft's exceptional power-to-weight ratio. Within seconds, it had disappeared from visual range, becoming just another blip on the radar displays that filled Hangar 8. "Ghost 1 is airborne." Natalie's voice came through the radio, calm and professional. "Beginning intercept approach. All stations maintain radio discipline." On the tactical display, 6 red symbols representing enemy aircraft continued their approach towards Silver Valley. But now there was a single blue symbol climbing rapidly to meet them. One F-35 Lightning II, flown by a pilot who had supposedly been dead for 12 years. Grant's voice was quiet as she watched the display. "She's outnumbered 6-1, flying. An aircraft that enemy forces have detailed intelligence about, against pilots who know exactly what to expect from standard F-35 tactics." Cooper was monitoring multiple radio frequencies, listening to traffic between the approaching aircraft and their command authority. What he heard confirmed his worst fears. "Chief," he said quietly, "they're not just planning to attack the base. They're planning to capture it. This is the opening move of a larger operation." Blake looked up from his station with growing alarm. "Capture it? What do you mean?" "Listen to their communications," Cooper replied. "They're coordinating with ground forces. This isn't just an airstrike, it's an invasion." The implications settled over Hangar 8 like a cloud. If enemy forces captured Silver Valley Air Force Base, they would have access to some of the most advanced military technology in the world. The F-35 program, classified research projects, and strategic intelligence would all be compromised. But between the advancing enemy and the successful execution of their plans stood one obstacle they hadn't anticipated: a ghost pilot who had spent 12 years preparing for exactly this kind of impossible mission. As the tactical display showed the two forces approaching their inevitable meeting point, everyone in Hangar 8 understood that they were about to witness something extraordinary. Captain Natalie Torres was about to remind the world why some pilots become legends and why sometimes the best defense is a good ghost. 20,000 feet above Silver Valley Air Force Base, Captain Natalie Torres felt the familiar rush of returning home. Not to any geographical location, but to the environment where she truly belonged. Alone in a cockpit, facing impossible odds with nothing but her skills and her aircraft standing between innocent people and catastrophe. The F-35's heads-up display painted a tactical picture that would have terrified most pilots. 6 advanced fighter aircraft, flying in perfect formation, equipped with electronic warfare systems specifically designed to counter her aircraft's stealth capabilities. They knew she was coming, they knew what aircraft she was flying, and they had prepared countermeasures for every standard F-35 tactical approach. What they didn't know was that Captain Natalie Torres had never been a standard pilot. Silver Valley. "Control, this is Ghost 1. Natalie's voice came through the radio with the calm professionalism that had made her legendary among those who knew her true identity. "I have visual contact with hostile formation. 6 aircraft, advanced configuration, maintaining attack vector toward base." In Hangar 8, the crew gathered around their communications equipment, listening to radio traffic that was about to make military aviation history. Chief Master Sergeant Cooper monitored multiple frequencies. Technical Sergeant Grant tracked the tactical display, and Airman Blake recorded everything for what would undoubtedly become one of the most analyzed missions in Air Force history. "Ghost 1, Silver Valley Control," came the response from the base control tower. "You are cleared to engage at your discretion. Rules of engagement are weapons-free." But instead of immediately engaging the enemy formation, Natalie did something that defied every tactical manual ever written. She turned off her aircraft's active radar systems, switched her electronic warfare suite to passive mode, and began flying directly toward the center of the enemy formation. "What is she doing?" Blake asked, staring at the tactical display in confusion. "She's making herself invisible to our tracking systems too." Grant was studying the display with growing understanding. "She's not trying to outfight them. She's trying to outthink them." On the radio, they could hear enemy communications becoming increasingly agitated as their carefully planned intercept began to fall apart. The pilots had been briefed on F-35 capabilities and standard engagement tactics, but the aircraft approaching them wasn't following any known patterns. "Base unit, this is Eagle Lead," came a transmission on one of the enemy frequencies Cooper was monitoring. "Target aircraft has disappeared from our tracking systems. We're showing no radar contact." Grant looked up from her display with sudden realization. She's using the F-35 stealth capabilities in a way they didn't expect. They planned for conventional engagement, but she's gone full stealth in the middle of their formation. What happened next would be studied in military academies for decades. Instead of engaging the enemy aircraft with long-range missiles, as doctrine dictated, Natalie used her invisibility to position herself directly underneath the enemy formation's lead aircraft. At a range of less than 500 meters, practically point-blank range in aerial combat, she reactivated her targeting systems and fired. The first enemy aircraft exploded in a fireball that lit up the afternoon sky. Before the remaining 5 pilots could even process what had happened, Natalie had already maneuvered behind the second aircraft and fired again. "Jesus Christ," Blake breathed, watching the tactical display as 2 red symbols simply disappeared. She just took out 2 fighters in about 10 seconds. But the remaining enemy pilots were professionals, and they reacted with the speed and coordination that comes from extensive training. The formation split apart, each aircraft taking a different vector to deny Natalie the advantage of positioning. What followed was a display of aerial combat that pushed both pilot and aircraft to their absolute limits. Natalie used every advantage the F-35 possessed: its stealth characteristics, its advanced sensors, its superior maneuverability, but she used them in ways that went far beyond standard tactical doctrine. Instead of maintaining distance and fighting a conventional beyond visual range engagement, she closed to knife-fighting range where her superior training and the F-35's advanced, helmet-mounted display system gave her decisive advantages. She flew through cloud formations to break enemy radar locks, used terrain masking to approach from unexpected angles, and executed maneuvers that pushed the aircraft's flight envelope to its limits. "Silver Valley Control, Ghost One," Natalie's voice came through the radio, slightly strained now from the G-forces of extreme maneuvering. 3 hostile aircraft neutralized, engaging remaining targets. Cooper was listening to enemy communications with growing amazement. The professional discipline that had characterized their initial approach was breaking down as pilots found themselves facing tactics they had never encountered before. Eagle 4, Eagle 5, this is Eagle Lead, came an increasingly desperate transmission. Target aircraft is not following any known F-35 engagement patterns. Request immediate support from ground control, but there would be no support coming. The remaining 3 enemy aircraft were now facing a pilot who had spent 12 years perfecting techniques that existed nowhere in official military doctrine. Techniques developed during classified missions that had never been officially acknowledged. Grant was monitoring the engagement through the F-35's data link, watching sensor information that showed Natalie executing maneuvers that should have been impossible. "Chief, look at these G-force readings. She's pulling sustained turns that are beyond normal human tolerance levels." Cooper studied the data with professional appreciation. "She's not flying like a normal pilot, Lisa. She's flying like someone who's redefined what's possible." The fourth enemy aircraft fell to a missile fired from an angle that physics said should have been impossible to achieve. The fifth aircraft tried to disengage, turning away from the battle zone at maximum speed. But Natalie pursued with relentless efficiency. The F-35's superior speed and acceleration allowed her to close the distance, and the enemy pilot's evasive maneuvers only delayed the inevitable by a few minutes, when the sixth and final enemy aircraft exploded in a brilliant flash of light. The radio channels fell silent except for Natalie's calm voice. "Silver Valley Control, this is Ghost 1. All hostile aircraft neutralized. Threat to base eliminated. Beginning return to base." In Hangar 8, the crew stood in stunned silence, trying to process what they had just witnessed. 6 advanced fighter aircraft, flown by professional military pilots, had been eliminated by a single F-35 in less than 15 minutes of combat. Blake was the first to find his voice. "Chief, I've never seen anything like that. Is that what real combat pilots can do?" Cooper shook his head slowly. "Sam, that's what the best combat pilot in the world can do. That's why Captain Torres became a legend, and why some people were willing to let her officially die to keep her capabilities classified." Grant was studying the mission data with professional fascination. The maneuvers she executed, the tactical approaches she used, none of that is in any training manual. She's developed techniques that go beyond what anyone thought was possible with the F-35. As they waited for Natalie's return, Cooper reflected on what they had witnessed. For 12 years, Captain Natalie Torres had been officially dead, existing only as a ghost in the margins of military aviation. But today, she had reminded the world that some capabilities are too valuable to lose, even if they must remain officially invisible. The F-35 Lightning II that appeared on the horizon 10 minutes later carried more than just a returning pilot. It carried proof that sometimes the most important missions are flown by people who officially don't exist, and that the greatest pilots are those who can accomplish the impossible when everything depends on it. As Natalie lined up for her approach to Silver Valley's runway, everyone in Hangar 8 understood that they had just witnessed the return of a legend. The ghost pilot had flown again, and the skies would never be the same. The F-35 Lightning II touched down on Silver Valley's runway with the precise control that marked Natalie Torres as a pilot at the absolute peak of her profession. But even before the aircraft had rolled to a complete stop, Chief Master Sergeant Cooper could see emergency vehicles and security personnel converging on the flight line. Word of the unauthorized mission had reached the command structure, and the consequences were about to begin. As Natalie taxied the F-35 back toward Hangar 8, Cooper's radio erupted with urgent communications from multiple sources. Base security wanted to know who had authorized the civilian contractor to fly a combat mission. The Pentagon was demanding immediate reports about the engagement. Intelligence agencies were asking questions about classified tactics that weren't supposed to exist. "Chief," Technical Sergeant Grant called out from her monitoring station, "we've got incoming calls from everyone up to and including the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Everyone wants to know what just happened up there." Cooper watched the F-35 approach their hangar, knowing that the next few hours would determine whether he and his crew were heroes or prisoners. "Lisa, from this moment forward, our story is simple. Dr. Jennifer Walsh was conducting a routine assessment when the base came under attack. She volunteered to fly a defensive mission because our primary pilot was unavailable. We provided support because American lives were at stake." Airman Blake looked up from his terminal with obvious concern. "Chief, that story has some pretty big holes in it. Like how a civilian contractor knew how to fly military combat missions." "Then we stick to what we observed," Cooper replied firmly. Dr. Walsh demonstrated exceptional knowledge of aircraft systems. When the emergency arose, she claimed to have pilot qualifications that weren't in her official record. We made a command decision to trust her judgment. The F-35 came to a stop in front of Hangar 8, and Natalie began the post-flight shutdown procedures with the same methodical precision she'd shown throughout the mission. But through the cockpit canopy, Cooper could see the strain of the engagement written on her face. Flying a 1 versus 6 air combat mission, even for someone of her capabilities, had demanded everything she had to give. As Natalie climbed down from the aircraft, a convoy of official vehicles arrived at the hangar. Colonel James Reed, the base commander, emerged from the lead vehicle, along with several officers Cooper didn't recognize. Their expressions suggested that the next conversation would be far from routine. "Chief Master Sergeant Cooper," Colonel Reed called out as he approached, his voice carrying the careful neutrality of someone preparing for a very difficult discussion. "I need to speak with you and your contractor immediately." But before Cooper could respond, one of the officers accompanying Reed stepped forward. Cooper recognized the insignia of a Pentagon intelligence specialist, and his stomach dropped. Intelligence meant classified programs, and classified programs meant problems. That went far beyond normal military discipline. "Dr. Walsh," the intelligence officer called out, "I'm Major Patricia Williams, Pentagon Intelligence Division. We need to discuss your recent activities." Natalie had finished her post-flight equipment check and was walking toward the group, with the same measured pace she'd maintained since arriving at Silver Valley. But now there was no pretense about her civilian contractor status. She moved with the confident authority of someone accustomed to dealing with senior military officers. "Major Williams," Natalie replied, "I assume you're here about the unauthorized use of military aircraft for defensive purposes." Williams studied Natalie's face carefully. "Among other things, Dr. Walsh, we've been reviewing your employment records, and we're finding some interesting discrepancies. Your qualifications seem to exceed what any civilian contractor should possess." Cooper stepped forward, hoping to protect his crew from the political fallout he saw coming. "Ma'am, Dr. Walsh volunteered to fly a defensive mission when our installation came under attack. We provided support because—" "Chief," Williams interrupted, "we're not here to discuss your crew's actions. We're here because Dr. Jennifer Walsh appears to have combat flight experience that doesn't match her official background." Grant had been listening to the conversation while monitoring communications equipment, but now she looked up with obvious concern. "Ma'am, are you saying Dr. Walsh isn't who she claims to be?" Williams glanced at Colonel Reed, who nodded grimly. "Sergeant, we're saying that the person you know as Dr. Jennifer Walsh may have military experience that wasn't disclosed in her contractor credentials." Blake felt his world shifting beneath his feet. "But ma'am, if she's military, why would she be working as a civilian contractor?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Williams looked at each of the crew members in turn, then back at Natalie, who had remained silent throughout the exchange. "Dr. Walsh," Williams said carefully, "would you like to explain to these people who you really are?" For a long moment, Natalie didn't respond. She looked at the crew who had supported her mission, then at the F-35 that had carried her through another impossible engagement, then back at the assembled officers. "Major Williams," she said finally, "that's a conversation that requires security clearances above the level of most people present." Williams pulled out a tablet and began scrolling through classified files. "Actually, Dr. Walsh, I think it's time for complete honesty. Chief Cooper, Sergeant Grant, Airman Blake, what I'm about to tell you is classified at the highest levels, but given your involvement in today's events, you have a need to know." Cooper felt his pulse quicken. Need to know briefings meant information that could change careers, end careers, or in extreme cases, require people to disappear into protective custody. "The woman you know as Dr. Jennifer Walsh," Williams continued, "is actually Captain Natalie Torres, United States Air Force. She was officially killed in action 12 years ago, during a classified mission called Operation Midnight Echo." Blake's voice was barely above a whisper. killed in action? But she's standing right here. Williams nodded grimly. Captain Torres volunteered for a mission that required her to officially die. For the past 12 years, she's been operating under deep cover, moving through military installations under various contractor identities. Grant looked from Williams to Natalie with growing understanding. She's been preparing us. All those assessments, all those inspections. She's been making sure our aircraft and crews are ready for missions like today. Exactly, Williams confirmed. Captain Torres has been part of a classified program designed to ensure mission readiness for scenarios that conventional planning can't address. Cooper studied Natalie's face, seeing her clearly for the first time since she'd arrived at Silver Valley. Captain, how many times have you done this? How many bases have you visited? Natalie's composure showed the first crack it had displayed since revealing her identity. Chief, I've been to 47 installations over the past 8 years. Every time, the story is the same routine assessment. Observe the crew, ensure readiness, move on to the next assignment. But today was different, Blake observed. Today was different because today the preparation became real, Natalie replied. Today, instead of making sure you were ready for a hypothetical emergency, I had to trust that you were ready for an actual one. Colonel Reed had been listening to the conversation with growing amazement. Captain Torres, the mission you just flew eliminating 6 advanced fighters in single combat, that's going to be studied in military academies for decades. Sir, Natalie said quietly, the mission I just flew was only possible because I had a crew that believed in doing the right thing, even when the right thing went against every regulation in the book. Cooper looked at his crew, then at the officers surrounding them, then at the F-35 that had just returned from making history. So what happens now? Do we get court-martialed for supporting an unauthorized mission? Major Williams smiled for the first time since arriving. Chief, you just helped prevent what could have been the most significant military disaster in recent history. The intelligence we've gathered from today's engagement has already prevented 3 similar attacks at other installations. But even as the immediate crisis appeared to be resolving, Cooper could see that larger challenges were ahead. Natalie Torres had spent 12 years as a ghost, but today's mission had made her visible again. The question was whether someone who had been officially dead for over a decade could find a way to officially live again. The ghost pilot's secret was out, but her story was far from over. As the immediate crisis at Silver Valley Air Force Base stabilized, Major Patricia Williams made a decision that would change everything for Captain Natalie Torres and the crew who had supported her impossible mission. Instead of the typical damage control and classification that usually followed unauthorized operations, Williams chose transparency, at least within the secure confines of Hangar 8. Chief Cooper, Sergeant Grant, Airman Blake, Williams announced, "What I'm about to tell you about Operation Midnight Echo is classified at levels that most general officers never see. But given your involvement in today's events, you've earned the right to know the full story." Williams activated a secure tablet and connected it to the hangar's presentation system. The first image that appeared was a photograph of a younger Natalie Torres in full flight gear, standing beside an F-22 Raptor. The woman in the photo had the same confident bearing, but there was something in her eyes that spoke of someone who hadn't yet paid the full price of serving in the shadows. 12 years ago, Williams began. Captain Torres was considered the finest stealth fighter pilot in the United States Air Force. She had completed 17 classified missions with a perfect success rate, including operations that redefined what was considered possible with advanced aircraft. Blake studied the photograph with obvious amazement. "Ma'am, she looks so young." How old was she when she became a stealth fighter pilot? 24 when she earned her wings, Williams replied. 28 when she volunteered for Operation Midnight Echo, the youngest pilot ever selected for that level of classified operations. Technical Sergeant Grant leaned forward, her professional curiosity engaged. "Major, what exactly was Operation Midnight Echo?" Williams clicked to the next slide, which showed a map of hostile territory with a single red dot marking a location deep behind enemy lines. August 15, 2012. Intelligence indicated that a key enemy leadership meeting was taking place at a heavily fortified compound. The target was surrounded by the most sophisticated air defense network ever assembled, including systems specifically designed to counter American stealth technology. Cooper felt his blood chill. "Man, you're talking about a penetration mission into airspace that was considered impenetrable." "Exactly," Williams confirmed. Conventional planning indicated that any attack on the target would require a full squadron of aircraft and would likely result in significant casualties. The Joint Chiefs were prepared to abort the mission rather than accept those losses. Natalie, who had been silent throughout the briefing, finally spoke. "That's when I volunteered for a solo mission. One aircraft, one pilot, flying below all known detection thresholds, using tactics that existed nowhere in official doctrine." Williams clicked to the next slide, showing technical diagrams of flight paths and altitude profiles that defied conventional understanding of stealth aircraft. Capabilities. Captain Torres proposed flying at altitudes and speeds that were beyond the operational parameters of the F-22. She suggested using terrain masking and atmospheric conditions in ways that had never been attempted. Grant studied the flight profiles with professional fascination. These approach vectors, they're flying through mountain valleys at altitudes that would leave no margin for error. One mistake and the pilot dies," Natalie finished quietly. But it was the only way to reach the target undetected. Blake was staring at the tactical display with growing understanding. "Captain, you flew a mission that conventional planning said was impossible." "Not just flew it," Williams corrected. "She executed it flawlessly. The target was eliminated with precision that exceeded all expectations, and she extracted through hostile airspace without being detected by any enemy systems." Cooper leaned back in his chair, trying to process the magnitude of what he was hearing. "So the mission was successful. Why did Captain Torres have to officially die?" Williams's expression darkened. "Because during the mission, Captain Torres discovered intelligence that revealed a much larger threat. The enemy leadership she eliminated was planning a coordinated attack on multiple American military installations using stolen classified information." The implications began to sink in for the assembled crew. Grant was the first to make the connection. "The attack we faced today, it was part of that larger plan." "The same network," Williams confirmed. "For 12 years, they've been preparing for coordinated strikes using the intelligence they gathered. Captain Torres's official death allowed her to operate in the shadows, tracking their activities and ensuring our installations were prepared." Natalie pulled up additional files on her own tablet, sharing them with the Hangar's display system. 47 bases over 8 years. Each assessment was real, but I was also gathering intelligence on enemy capabilities and ensuring that crews like yours were ready for what was coming. Blake studied the mission records with obvious awe. "Captain, you've been fighting a 12-year intelligence war that most people didn't even know existed." "Not fighting," Natalie corrected. "Preparing." Today was the first time in 12 years that the preparation became actual combat. Cooper was beginning to understand the full scope of what they had witnessed. "The tactics you used today, the maneuvers that went beyond standard F-35 capabilities, you developed those during your shadow operations. Every base I visited, every crew I worked with, every aircraft I assessed, all of it contributed to developing techniques that could counter the enemy's stolen intelligence," Natalie explained. "They knew how to fight conventional F-35 tactics. They had no idea how to fight what I'd learned to do." Williams activated another display showing the global scope of the enemy network. Today's attack on Silver Valley was scheduled to be the first of coordinated strikes on 17 different installations. Captain Torres's mission data is allowing us to prevent all of them. Grant looked from the tactical displays to Natalie with new respect. Ma'am, you've been protecting all of us for 12 years, and we never even knew you existed. That was the point, Natalie replied. The best protection is the kind that remains invisible until it's needed. Blake raised a question that had been bothering him since the briefing began. But Captain, what about your family, your friends? For 12 years they've believed you were dead. For the first time since the briefing began, Natalie's composure showed cracks. That was the price of the mission, airman. Some sacrifices can't be undone. Cooper studied her face, seeing the cost of 12 years of isolation and official non-existence. Captain, today's mission changes things, doesn't it? You can't go back to being invisible after what happened here. Williams nodded grimly. That's correct, Chief. Captain Torres's cover is completely blown. Every intelligence agency in the world will be analyzing today's engagement, and her tactics will be studied and copied. So what happens now? Grant asked. Now, Williams said, we have to decide whether Captain Natalie Torres remains officially dead, or whether it's time for her to officially come back to life. The question hung in the air of Hangar 8, carrying implications that went far beyond military protocol. After 12 years of existing as a ghost, Natalie Torres was facing the possibility of rejoining the world she had left behind, but the decision wouldn't be hers alone. The shadow war she had been fighting was far from over, and the enemies she had spent 12 years tracking were still out there, planning their next move. As the briefing continued, everyone in Hangar 8 understood that they had become part of something much larger than a single mission. They were now part of a story that had been 12 years in the making, and that was far from finished. The ghost pilot's secret was out, but the war in the shadows was just beginning to come into the light. 3 hours after the most extraordinary air combat mission in recent military history, Silver Valley Air Force Base had become the center of a bureaucratic storm that threatened to engulf everyone involved. The Pentagon had dispatched teams of investigators, intelligence analysts, and senior officers, all demanding answers to questions that had no simple explanations. Chief Master Sergeant Cooper found himself in the unusual position of being both a hero and a potential defendant. The mission he had supported had saved countless lives and prevented a catastrophic attack, but it had also violated virtually every regulation governing the use of military aircraft and weapons systems. Chief, Colonel James Reed said during what had become an increasingly tense debriefing session, I need you to understand the position you've put me in. A civilian contractor flew a combat mission from my base, using my aircraft, with support from my personnel. I need explanations that go beyond, it seemed like the right thing to do. Cooper had been preparing for this conversation since the moment Natalie's F-35 had touched down. Sir, Dr. Walsh presented herself as having pilot qualifications that weren't reflected in her official credentials. When the base came under attack and our primary pilot was unavailable, she volunteered to fly a defensive mission. Given the imminent threat to the installation, I made a command decision to provide support. It was a carefully crafted statement that was technically accurate while revealing nothing about Natalie's true identity. But Cooper could see that Colonel Reed wasn't entirely convinced. Chief, pilot qualifications is a rather broad term. The mission she flew required combat experience at the highest levels. Civilian contractors don't typically possess those kinds of capabilities. Before Cooper could respond, Major Patricia Williams entered the briefing room with several files, marked with classification levels that made everyone present straighten unconsciously. Behind her walked a figure that Cooper recognized as General Mark Sullivan, one of the highest-ranking officers in the Air Force. Colonel Reed, General Sullivan announced, I'm here to clarify the situation regarding today's events. The atmosphere in the room shifted immediately. When generals appeared unannounced, careers were either made or destroyed, and everyone present understood that the next few minutes would determine which direction their futures would take. "General," Colonel Reed responded, coming to attention. Along with everyone else in the room, I wasn't expecting ... No one was expecting today's events, Colonel, Sullivan interrupted. But now that they've occurred, we need to address some uncomfortable realities. Sullivan activated a secure presentation system and displayed classification markings that Cooper had never seen before. What I'm about to discuss is protected under special access programs that exist at levels above normal Pentagon clearances. Chief Cooper, your actions today have elevated your security status whether you wanted it or not. Cooper felt his stomach drop. Special access programs meant lifelong obligations to secrecy, ongoing security, monitoring, and the kind of classified knowledge that could never be forgotten or shared. "Sir," Cooper said carefully, "I was just doing my job." "Chief, your job description just expanded considerably," Sullivan replied. "The pilot you supported today is part of a program that has been operating in the deepest levels of classification for over a decade. By providing that support, you and your crew have become part of that program." Technical Sergeant Grant and Airman Blake exchanged glances from across the room where they had been waiting for their own interviews. The implications were becoming clear. They weren't just witnesses to an extraordinary mission. They were now permanent participants in something much larger. "General," Cooper asked, "what exactly does that mean for my crew?" Sullivan clicked to the next slide, showing organizational charts for programs that officially didn't exist. "It means that Chief Master Sergeant Cooper, Technical Sergeant Grant, and Airman Blake are now assigned to Special Operations Aviation Support Division, effective immediately. Your new mission is to provide ground support for operations that require the highest levels of secrecy and capability." Blake raised his hand tentatively. "Sir, does that mean we'll be working with Captain Torres on future missions?" "Airman," Sullivan replied, "Captain Torres doesn't officially exist. Dr. Jennifer Walsh is a civilian contractor who happened to possess unusual qualifications. What you'll be supporting are operations that require similar levels of ... flexibility." Cooper was beginning to understand the full scope of what they had become involved in. "Sir, are you saying that today's mission was part of ongoing operations?" "Chief, today's mission was the culmination of 12 years of preparation. But the threats that necessitated that preparation haven't disappeared. If anything, they've become more sophisticated and dangerous." Major Williams stepped forward with additional briefing materials. "Chief, the enemy network that attacked Silver Valley today has been planning similar operations against installations worldwide. Your crew's demonstrated ability to support unconventional missions makes you invaluable for preventing future attacks." Grant looked up from the classified documents she'd been reviewing. "Ma'am, are you saying that there are other pilots like Captain Torres? Other people who are officially dead, but actually conducting secret operations?" Williams and General Sullivan exchanged glances before Williams responded. "Sergeant, there are military capabilities that exist in the shadows because they're too valuable to acknowledge and too dangerous to abandon. Today's mission proved that sometimes those capabilities are the only thing standing between safety and catastrophe." Cooper was studying organizational charts that showed a network of special operations units, classified research programs, and personnel assignments that seemed to exist parallel to the official military structure. "General, this program, how long has it been operating?" "In various forms for over 20 years, Sullivan replied. But Captain Torres's integration into the program represented a new approach. Instead of maintaining completely separate operations, we embedded critical capabilities within routine military activities. Blake was trying to process the implications of what he was hearing. So the assessments, the inspections, The contractor evaluations, some of them are exactly what they appear to be, Williams interrupted. Others are cover for operations that require the highest levels of security. The challenge is that most people involved never know which is which. Cooper looked around the room at his crew, then back at the senior officers who were offering them a chance to become part of something extraordinary and dangerous. "Sir, what happens if we decline this assignment?" General Sullivan's expression was understanding but firm. "Chief, you can't unknow what you've learned today. You can't forget what you've witnessed. The only question is whether you'll be part of the solution or spend the rest of your careers in positions where your knowledge can be contained." It wasn't really a choice, and everyone in the room understood that. The mission they had supported had changed them irrevocably, making them part of a shadow world that operated parallel to everything they had previously understood about military service. "General," Cooper said finally, "what are our orders?" Sullivan smiled for the first time since entering the room. "Your orders are to continue doing exactly what you've been doing, maintaining the finest aircraft in the world and supporting the pilots who fly them. The only difference is that sometimes those pilots will be conducting missions that officially never happened." As the briefing concluded, Cooper understood that his crew had crossed a threshold that could never be uncrossed. They were no longer simply mechanics and technicians supporting routine operations. They had become guardians of secrets that could reshape the balance of global power. The Ghost Pilot's mission was complete, but theirs was just beginning. In the shadows of military aviation, where the most important work was often the most invisible, they would help ensure that when the impossible became necessary, someone would be ready to make it possible. The war in the shadows had claimed new recruits, and the world would be safer because of their willingness to serve in the darkness. As evening fell over Silver Valley Air Force Base, the most extraordinary debriefing in military aviation, history moved to a secure conference room where the full truth about Captain Natalie Torres could finally be revealed. General Mark Sullivan had cleared the room of all but essential personnel, leaving only Chief Master Sergeant Cooper, Technical Sergeant Grant, Airman Blake, Major Williams, and Natalie herself. "What I'm about to tell you," General Sullivan began, "represents the complete and unredacted truth about Operation Midnight Echo and its aftermath. This information has been known to fewer than 20 people over the past 12 years. Sullivan activated a presentation system that displayed classified documents dating back to 2012. The first image was a mission brief marked with security classifications that most military personnel would never see in their entire careers. "Captain Torres," Sullivan said, looking directly at Natalie, "please tell them what really happened during Operation Midnight Echo." For the first time since revealing her identity, Natalie looked uncertain. The professional composure that had carried her through 12 years of hidden service showed cracks as she prepared to share truths that had been classified at the highest levels. "The official story," she began quietly, "is that I flew a solo mission to eliminate enemy leadership and was killed during extraction. The real story is more complicated." She stood and moved to the display, calling up tactical maps that showed the actual mission profile. The target wasn't just enemy leadership. Intelligence had discovered a meeting between hostile forces and someone from within our own command structure. Someone who had been selling classified information for years. Cooper felt his blood chill. "Ma'am, you're talking about treason at the highest levels." "I'm talking about a conspiracy that went to the very top of military intelligence," Natalie confirmed. "The mission wasn't just to eliminate enemy leadership, it was to gather evidence of the betrayal and identify the source." Grant leaned forward, her professional curiosity overcoming her shock. "Captain, how did you gather that evidence during a combat mission?" Natalie clicked to the next slide, showing technical specifications for recording equipment that had been integrated into her F-22. My aircraft was equipped with surveillance systems that could intercept and record communications from the target facility. During the mission, I recorded conversations that proved the conspiracy existed and identified several people involved. Blake was staring at the mission data with growing amazement. "Ma'am, you were conducting intelligence gathering in combat operations simultaneously?" "The combat mission was cover for the intelligence gathering," Natalie explained. "Eliminating the enemy leadership was secondary to recording evidence of the betrayal." General Sullivan took over the briefing. What Captain Torres discovered during that mission was a network of compromised personnel that extended throughout the military intelligence community. The evidence she gathered led to the arrest and prosecution of 17 people, including 2 general officers. Cooper was beginning to understand the scope of what they were hearing. "Sir, but if Captain Torres gathered evidence that led to successful prosecutions, why did she have to die?" "Because," Major Williams interjected, "the conspiracy was larger than anyone initially realized. The people Captain Torres helped expose were only part of a much bigger network. Her continued existence would have made her a target for elimination." Natalie nodded grimly. "The decision was made to officially kill Captain Torres and create a new identity that would allow me to continue investigating the broader conspiracy. For 12 years, I've been tracking the remaining members of that network." Grant was studying the mission files with professional fascination. "Captain, the attacks we faced today, they were connected to the original conspiracy?" "Direct continuation," Natalie confirmed. "The people I helped expose 12 years ago were working for a larger organization that has been planning coordinated attacks on American military installations. Today's attack was part of that plan." Blake looked up from the classified documents he'd been reviewing. "So for 12 years, you've been living as a dead person to track the people who betrayed our country?" "Living as a dead person, but serving as a very much alive protector," Sullivan corrected. "Captain Torres has prevented more attacks, saved more lives, and gathered more critical intelligence than any single operative in recent history." Cooper was trying to process the personal cost of what he was hearing. "Captain, what about your family, your friends? For 12 years, they've believed you were dead." For the first time during the briefing, Natalie's voice showed emotion. "Chief, that was the hardest part. My parents held a funeral. My sister visits my grave every year on the anniversary. My fiancé married someone else and named his daughter after me." The room fell silent as the human cost of her sacrifice became clear. Grant was the first to speak. "Ma'am, I can't imagine living with that." "Some missions require sacrifices that go beyond physical danger," Natalie replied quietly. "Sometimes serving your country means giving up everything that makes life worth living." Sullivan activated another display showing global intelligence, networks, and threat assessments. But Captain Torres's sacrifice has had extraordinary results. The intelligence she's gathered has prevented attacks in 17 countries, led to the disruption of terrorist networks, and maintained American strategic advantages in critical regions. Blake was studying the global impact data with obvious awe. "Sir, she's been conducting a one-person intelligence war for over a decade." "Not one person," Sullivan corrected. "Captain Torres has been supported by a network of personnel who provide logistics, intelligence, and operational support. But she's been the primary field operative conducting the most dangerous missions." Cooper looked at Natalie with new understanding. "Captain, when you arrived at Silver Valley for your assessment, you knew the attack was coming, didn't you?" "I suspected it," Natalie admitted. "Intelligence patterns suggested that Silver Valley was being targeted, but I didn't know the timeline. My assessment visit was cover for positioning myself to respond if the attack materialized." Major Williams pulled up additional files showing intelligence intercepts and threat analysis. Captain Torres's presence at Silver Valley wasn't coincidental. "We've been tracking increased enemy activity for months, and her assessment was actually An advanced defensive deployment. Grant was beginning to see the bigger picture. So the past 3 days, while we thought we were being evaluated, we were actually being prepared for combat. Your aircraft was being verified as mission-ready. Your crew was being assessed for capability, and defensive measures were being prepared, Natalie confirmed. The assessment was real, but it was also preparation for what happened today. General Sullivan stood and moved to the window overlooking the flight line where the F-35 sat in Hangar 8, which brings us to the critical question. Captain Torres's cover is completely blown. Every intelligence agency in the world will be analyzing today's mission. She can never again operate as a hidden asset. Cooper understood the implications immediately. Sir, you're saying that Captain Torres's 12-year mission is over. I'm saying that phase of her mission is over, Sullivan replied. The question now is whether Captain Natalie Torres remains officially dead, or whether it's time for her to officially return to life. Natalie looked at each person in the room, then back at Sullivan. General, what are my options? Option 1. We create a new cover identity, and you continue operating in the shadows with a different background. Option 2. We officially resurrect Captain Natalie Torres and integrate you into conventional special operations. Option 3. We officially acknowledge your 12 years of service and allow you to return to civilian life. The weight of the decision settled over the room. After 12 years of existing as a ghost, Natalie Torres was being offered the chance to rejoin the world she had left behind. But the question remained. After spending half of her adult life as someone who officially didn't exist, could she find a way to become real again? And more importantly, was the war she had been fighting finally over? Or was this just the beginning of a new phase in a conflict that had already cost her everything? The ghost pilot's mission was complete, but her life was just beginning again. 6 months after the most extraordinary mission in modern military aviation history, Hangar 8 at Silver Valley Air Force Base was transformed into something unprecedented, the site of a ceremony to officially resurrect someone from the dead. The assembled crowd included senior military officers, intelligence officials, and a small group of family members who were about to discover that their loved one had never actually died. Captain Natalie Torres stood in full dress uniform for the first time in 12 years, wearing ribbons and decorations that told a story of service that had officially never happened. Beside her stood Chief Master Sergeant Cooper, Technical Sergeant Grant, and Senior Airman Blake, now promoted and permanently assigned to the Special Operations Aviation Support Division. The ceremony had been classified until the morning it occurred. But now the story of the ghost pilot was finally being told to those who needed to know. In the front row sat Natalie's parents, her sister, and most emotionally challenging of all, her former fiancé with his wife and the daughter they had named after the woman they thought they had lost. General Mark Sullivan approached the podium that had been set up in front of the F-35 Lightning II, the aircraft that had carried Natalie through her final mission as a ghost and her first mission as a returning legend. Ladies and gentlemen, Sullivan began, today we correct one of the most necessary deceptions in military history. Today, we officially acknowledge 12 years of service that saved countless lives while remaining completely invisible to the world. He paused, looking directly at Natalie. Captain Torres, please step forward. Natalie moved with the same measured precision that had characterized her movements since arriving at Silver Valley 6 months earlier. But now there was no pretense, no hidden identity, no carefully constructed facade. For the first time in 12 years, she was exactly who she appeared to be. Captain Natalie Torres, Sullivan read from the official citation, for extraordinary service in the conduct of classified operations spanning 12 years, resulting in the prevention of terrorist attacks in 17 nations, the disruption of hostile intelligence networks, and the protection of American strategic interests worldwide. The formal language could barely capture the scope of what she had accomplished. Cooper, who had spent months learning the full extent of her shadow operations, understood that the official citation represented only a fraction of her actual achievements. Captain Torres, Sullivan continued, your willingness to sacrifice your official existence in service to your country represents the highest ideals of military service. Your actions during Operation Midnight Echo and subsequent classified operations have saved thousands of lives and prevented catastrophic attacks on American interests worldwide. But for Natalie, the most meaningful moment came when Sullivan called forward her family members. Her parents, who had believed their daughter was dead for over a decade, approached with a mixture of joy, confusion, and anger that would take years to fully resolve. Mom, Dad, Natalie said quietly, I know this doesn't make up for 12 years of believing I was gone. I know that serving my country doesn't excuse the pain you've suffered. Her mother, tears streaming down her face, reached out to touch her daughter's face as if to confirm she was real. Natalie, we buried you. We visit your grave. How do we explain this to people? You don't, Major Williams interjected gently. Captain Torres's return to official life is classified at levels that require complete discretion. To the world outside this room, she remains the civilian contractor Dr. Jennifer Walsh, who happened to possess exceptional aviation knowledge. It was a compromise that allowed Natalie to reconnect with her family while maintaining the secrecy that her continued service required. She would never again be completely invisible. But neither could she be completely visible. After the formal ceremony concluded, Cooper approached Natalie near the F-35 that had become the symbol of her return to official life. Captain, what's it like, being real again after 12 years as a ghost? Natalie ran her hand along the aircraft's surface, the same gesture she had made countless times during her years of hidden service. Chief, it's strange. For 12 years, I existed only in the moment of each mission. No past, no future, just the immediate requirements of whatever assignment I was conducting. Grant joined them, carrying the maintenance log that documented the F-35's extraordinary mission 6 months earlier. Ma'am, will you be staying at Silver Valley permanently? For now, Natalie replied. My new assignment is Commander of Special Operations Aviation Readiness, based here at Silver Valley. My mission is to ensure that when pilots face impossible situations, they have the support and preparation they need to succeed. Blake, now wearing the stripes of a senior airman, looked up from the pre-flight inspection he was conducting on the F-35. Captain, will there be other pilots like you? Other people operating in the shadows? Natalie exchanged glances with Major Williams, who nodded slightly. Sam, the threats that required my 12-year mission haven't disappeared. They've evolved, become more sophisticated, more dangerous. There will always be a need for people willing to serve in ways that can't be officially acknowledged. Cooper understood the implications. Ma'am, you're building a program that can produce more pilots like you. I'm building a program that can ensure no pilot ever has to spend 12 years officially dead in order to serve their country, Natalie corrected. The next generation of special operations aviators will have official support, official recognition, and official backup. As the afternoon progressed, dignitaries departed and the base returned to something approaching normal operations. But everyone who had participated in the ceremony understood that they had witnessed something extraordinary, the official acknowledgement of service that had been invisible for over a decade. That evening, as Natalie stood alone in Hangar 8 beside the F-35 that had carried her through so many impossible missions, she reflected on the journey that had brought her from a young pilot eager to serve her country to a legend who had sacrificed everything. For that service, Chief Cooper approached, carrying 2 cups of coffee and wearing the expression of someone who had something important to say. Captain, I wanted to thank you for trusting us. 6 months ago, when you first walked into this hangar, you could have remained hidden, conducted your assessment, and moved on. Instead, You chose to trust us with the truth. Natalie accepted the coffee gratefully. Chief, I learned something important during my years as a ghost. The most important missions are never accomplished alone. They require people willing to do the right thing, even when the right thing goes against every regulation and procedure. Cooper smiled. Speaking of which, ma'am, we just received word about a situation developing at an installation in Europe. Apparently, they have an aircraft readiness issue that might require someone with your particular expertise. Natalie's eyes lit up with the same focused intensity that had made her legendary among those who knew her true identity. Chief, it sounds like the Special Operations Aviation Readiness Division is about to receive its first official mission. As the hangar lights dimmed and the base settled into evening routine, the F-35 Lightning II stood ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. The ghost pilot had officially returned to life, but more importantly, she had returned to service in a capacity that would ensure other pilots never had to sacrifice their official existence to protect their country. The legend of the ghost pilot was officially over, but the story of Captain Natalie Torres, commander of Special Operations Aviation Readiness, was just beginning. In the skies above a world filled with new threats and evolving challenges, she would ensure that when the impossible became necessary, America's finest pilots would be ready to make it possible. The ghost had finally come home, and the skies would never be the same. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.